If you think it's annoying trying to find an outlet to charge your phone in an airport or a public place, just imagine finding a charging station for an electric car. Hi there, everyone. It's Jeff, and this is Plain English, where we help you upgrade your English with current events and trending topics. This is lesson 430, and that means JR has uploaded the full lesson to plainenglish.com/430. Coming up today, we all know the frustration of being caught away from home with a low or dead phone battery. We curse ourselves for not rationing the battery effectively. We borrow or even buy chargers. We frantically search for outlets. Speaking for myself, the anxiety starts building when my battery runs down to about 25%. Now imagine what it's like for drivers of electric cars. On today's lesson, we'll talk about how we'll all charge our batteries in the all-electric future. The English expression we'll review today is to have the luxury of something, and we have a quote of the week about innovation. Let's dive in. Transportation is responsible for about a quarter of the world's carbon dioxide emissions. 3/4 of that is represented by cars and trucks on the road. So, if the world is to meet its ambitious goals to reduce carbon emissions, transportation is a great place to start. Electric vehicles, or EVs, are seen as a crucial element to reducing the carbon emissions of transportation. EVs by themselves will not fully solve this problem. After all, much electricity is still generated by polluting fossil fuels. However, electric vehicles seem set to gradually replace the internal combustion engines that dominated the 20th and the first quarter of the 21st centuries. There are many advantages to electric vehicles. First, they contain many fewer parts, so they require less maintenance and are less likely to break down. For the same reason, they are expected to last longer. Second, they accelerate a lot faster, an advantage that is compounded by the fact that EVs are lighter. They're also quieter, a benefit for the driver and the people in the neighborhood. One big disadvantage, however, is that EV batteries have a limited range, usually about 400 kilometers. The batteries take a long time to charge, and for now, there isn't a large infrastructure of charging stations to power them. That, though, will have to change. Today, most electric car owners are relatively wealthy early adopters. They have access to an enclosed garage at home where they can charge their cars overnight. They use their electric cars for short trips around town, and they are often home well before they reach the end of their range. For longer trips, they can rent a traditional internal combustion engine and fill up at gas stations along their route. Many electric car owners also have a traditional internal combustion car as their family's second car. But if the future is all electric, there will be several problems. First, not everyone has a garage at home to plug their car into. Apartment dwellers who park on the street don't have the luxury of charging their EVs as they sleep. Second, journeys far from home will require a network of charging stations spaced out at sufficient intervals. Drivers will need to have the information they need to get to an available charging station before they run out of juice. Industry estimates suggest that a public charging station is needed for every 10 electric vehicles on the road. Today, there are over 1 million charging stations in the world. Most of them are in China. If EV demand continues to increase, that number will need to be in the hundreds of millions. The world won't need as many charging stations as gas stations because most people will charge at home overnight, but a worldwide network will need to develop. What will that look like? There are several ways new charging stations will develop. First, there are international networks of charging stations. ChargePoint and Ionity are two of the largest, but there are many smaller players in the market too. These companies do nothing but build dedicated charging stations. Major energy companies such as Shell and BP are adding charging stations to their existing gas stations. This makes sense because these companies are already known as a place to refuel a car, and they have the real estate already in place. Car companies, too, are investing in EV charging stations. Tesla, a maker of luxury electric vehicles, has its own network of charging stations. Volkswagen owns a share of Electrify America, a network of charging stations in the US. But charging an electric car won't be like filling up a gas tank because it takes longer to fully charge a battery. Therefore, if you are going to stop to charge your vehicle, you need something to do while it charges. That's why you're likely to see charging stations at places where you would typically spend 30 minutes to an hour. Places like grocery stores, shopping malls, movie theaters, and the like. For long distance travelers, hotels would be logical places for chargers. What about people who live in apartments and who park on the street? In America, many more homes have private garage or driveway parking than in more urbanized areas like Europe or Asia. Still, a lot of people park on the street and they can't just plug in overnight. Cities may build charging stations into existing urban infrastructure like street lamps or in public spaces like parks, schools, and libraries. Apartment complexes may install charging stations for tenants, and individual homeowners with a little extra space in the driveway can install public charging stations and make some extra cash. A big hurdle to transitioning to electric cars would be going on long trips. It can take several hours to fully charge a depleted battery. Now, a lot of vehicles have a range of 400 to 500 kilometers. On the vast majority of days, that's plenty if I start with a full battery. But if I want to go to Minneapolis, for example, that's 600 kilometers away from here. I could and would drive that in a day, no problem. With an electric vehicle, I couldn't. To do that trip, I'd have to stop for multiple hours somewhere to charge up enough to make it the full distance. That could take an 8-hour trip and make it a 12-hour trip or more. But batteries will get better, charging stations will get faster, and eventually we'll get longer range so that a fully charged battery can handle a full day of driving. Interestingly, Tesla is making all its battery packs the same size so that as battery technology gets better, you can buy a better battery and install it in your existing car. So you don't have to buy a whole new car just to take advantage of the better batteries and better range. Today's expression is to have the luxury of. Normally, when we think about the word luxury, we think about items that are expensive treats. We think about expensive handbags for women, handmade Italian suits for men. We think about expensive perfumes and colognes. Luxury hotels feature the highest quality materials, beautiful furniture, the most advanced electronics. Luxury apartments have the finest appliances, beautiful views, chef's kitchens. That's not always the way we use the word luxury, however. When we say someone has the luxury of something, we are describing an advantage one person has that other people don't have. During the pandemic, many of you had the luxury of working from home. Now, it may not have seemed like a luxury experience crammed on your sofa, kids making noise in the background, laundry piling up just out of your computer's camera view. But compared to being a bus driver, compared to being a nurse, compared to working in a high traffic area, all during a pandemic, well, working from home absolutely is a luxury, even if it doesn't feel like it to you. You have the luxury of working from home. You have an advantage that others don't have. And that's exactly how I used the phrase earlier today. We were talking about charging electric vehicles. Many EV owners charge their electric cars at home. They can do that because they have an enclosed garage or at least a driveway. They have the luxury of charging their electric vehicles at home. Why do we say that's a luxury? Because not everyone has that advantage. Think of all the apartment dwellers who have to park on the street. They don't have the luxury of charging their cars overnight because they don't have a garage. So, in this sense, some people have the luxury of charging their cars at home. Their garages might be dirty and cluttered. There may be lawnmower parts strewn about, empty boxes, broken toys everywhere, grease on the floor, a pile of leaves from last fall. The garage doesn't have to be luxurious because just having one is still an advantage that others don't have. Today's labor market is tight. Many companies are desperate for workers. To get them, some employers are removing some job requirements that they used to have. To waive a requirement is to temporarily not require something. So some companies ordinarily require new employees to pass a criminal background check. Some companies are now waiving that requirement, meaning that they are skipping the background check. Not all employers have the luxury of waiving background checks. If you run a child care agency, for example, you don't have the luxury of cutting corners on background checks. First of all, it's the law. Second, it's probably the right thing to do for the kids in your care. So we say that child care centers don't have the luxury of waiving background checks because they don't have that option or they don't have that advantage like other employers might. Again, in this case, a luxury is not about something expensive or even desirable. It's just about an advantage. One great way to eat healthy is to prepare your own meals using real ingredients at home. Frozen dinners and meals that come in a box are typically less healthy. However, not everyone has the luxury of cooking family meals from scratch every day. It's hard for me to prepare all my own meals. I can't imagine doing it for a family of 4. So, while I know it's much better to prepare meals from scratch, I certainly understand that not every family has the luxury of doing that. Sometimes, though, we can use to have the luxury of with things that are, well, luxuries in the traditional sense of the word. Here in the US, most office workers would get about 3 weeks of vacation per year plus holidays. In Latin America, you're drooling. Many of you don't have the luxury of taking multiple weeks off at a time. However, that's exactly how we feel when we talk to people from Europe or Australia. Before the pandemic, it was common to meet travelers from Australia who were spending a month in America on vacation. We'd say to them, it's hard for us to travel as far away as Australia because we don't have the luxury of spending a month at a time on vacation. Today's quote of the week is from Tom Freston, who co-founded the television network MTV. Here's what he says. Innovation is taking two things that exist and putting them together in a new way. A lot of times, people think innovation is having a totally original idea strike you like a bolt of lightning. But really, as Tom Freston says, it's more pedestrian than that. He says, innovation is taking two things that exist and putting them together in a new way. And that's all for today's Plain English. Congratulations on making it to the end of another episode, the very first of 2022. We have a lot of great things planned for the year, so stay tuned here to Plain English. Join as a free member at plainenglish.com, and you will be up to date on all the exciting developments we have in store for you this year. We'll be back with lesson number 431 on Thursday. See you then.